All right, welcome everybody to the first ever Black River Studio video. No bullshit, let's just get straight into this. This is a really cool trick that I just figured out on how to minimize cymbal bleed in, I can imagine pretty much any mic, but in this case we're going to be working on toms because I'm having trouble with this particular track trying to get the cymbal bleed and, some of the shell bleed from other shells in the kit to not, interfere with compression and EQ settings for my toms because I want my toms to sound super sick. This is a metal production, so they need to be, nice and bright, but also full at the same time. And my drum recording space is in my basement. It's a very small space, so it's hard to deal with bleed. Anyway, this is how I've decided to go about this. So basically, what we're looking at here is we're going to use a gate to send a MIDI on note to an EQ plugin, and that MIDI note is going to essentially modulate the low pass frequency of the EQ. So let me just disable any processing on these toms because I've already got this set up, and I'll walk you guys through it real quick. So let's solo the tom bus, and I do have a gate on here and some compression. Doesn't really matter all that much, but I'll remove that. Let's see what we got. And I should actually remove these fade outs. We can add those back in later to taste. All right, let's see. All right, and just to make it a little more clear, I'll extend that a bit. So you can see there's a lot of bleed going on there. So let's just shrink this back to where it was. That's a pretty decent amount of length for sustain in general. This is, adjust this to taste in your sessions, but we're just going to fly through this real quick, so I'm not going to worry about little details like that. Let's keep that tom bus soloed. So I'll play this one more time, and then I'm going to re-enable the effects on this tom 1 bus. Actually, you know what? Tom 1 isn't going to have that effect because I just removed it. So actually, let's just build this straight from scratch right now, and then we'll sample it back and forth later. Okay, so here's the EQ that I'm using on tom 1 in this case. This is generally the sound that I'm going for and what I'm hoping for at the end of the day. We're going to leave this here, and with this trick, we're going to be able to preserve what I've done here, including the attack of the drum, but also minimize the cymbal bleed in the background, which is pretty crazy. So the way that we do this is, in this case, in Reaper, we're using stock plugins for this. We're going to use regate, and we're not going to worry about the settings for the gate right now. We'll dial this in a moment. But to set this up, set regate as the first plugin on your channel. And the first thing you want to do is click on Send MIDI on Open Close Note 69. The note doesn't matter in this case, it's just set to 69 on channel 1. Now, it's also very important that you make sure that the wet knob is set to 0% because we don't actually want this gate doing anything to the audio at all. This will make sense in a few minutes. So the gate is set to 0% wet. We've enabled Send MIDI on Open Close, and that note is 69. Now we've got our EQ that we want to apply, and this is going to be our end result EQ, hopefully. What we need to do next is we need to add another EQ. So we're going to add the stock EQ from Reaper. All right. And we're going to get rid of all the unnecessary bands just for simplicity's sake. We'll re-enable this guy, and we're going to set this to low pass. Now, I'm just going to arbitrarily set this somewhere around, 3 to 400. Again, dial this into taste in your sessions, and we'll do that a little bit in a moment. So we've got a low pass filter on this EQ, but basically it's just going to ruin the sound, right? Like that's useless. What we need to do is we need to get the gate to tell this EQ that whenever the gate is open, to do this, okay? And whenever the gate is closed, to do this. And the way we do that, again, send MIDI note on open close, note 69 from the gate. In the EQ, we can use that MIDI note 69 to modulate this parameter. So we click on the parameters button right here, and then we're going to go to the effects parameter list, parameter modulation / MIDI link, and we're going to click on frequency low pass 1. So this is the parameter that we want to modulate. You see this little line right here? We're just going to set this slider to the line, and we're going to choose link from MIDI or FX parameter. Now we're just going to leave this at default for a moment, and we're going to try and dial this in and see what we can get out of this. So right off the bat, is this going to work for us? No. Okay, so let's see. So we've got channel 69. Okay, that's right. So we need to assign the parameter modulation to an actual MIDI note. I missed that step. So right here, you see where it says none. It's a big button. We're going to click on this. We're going to go to MIDI, note, and then we're going to find note 69. Now we should see some action here. Let's see. You see that? So the gate, as I mentioned, is triggering the EQ, this parameter, to be wide open for the duration that the gate itself is open. And then when the gate closes, the parameter returns back to its neutral position. Now, in this case, you can see I did set this around 370, I think, but it's up at 1160 now. It's basically because it's in the middle of this slider. This can be adjusted with the offset here, right? So I'm gonna put this like, yeah, close to 400. That's fine. Let's see what this sounds like. So it's actually pretty much bang on right now because I did adjust the gate settings earlier. But let's just say our gate settings are not ideal, right? So let's move this up to 400 milliseconds. What do we got now? See, now you can hear that second tom in the background, which we don't want. We don't want any of that. Basically, we want that EQ to open up, wide open, no restriction on the frequency spectrum for the duration of the attack, and maybe just a little bit past the attack, the initial transient. And then as soon as that bright attack that we need to preserve has passed by, we want the EQ to clamp down on that frequency with the low pass and let only the sustain through. So the release is really key here, because if we set the release too long, then we leave the gate open for too long and the EQ doesn't react in time. You see, it's a little too slow, so we're getting that bleed from the second tom in this mic. So if we dial this in, let's bring it down to 200. You can still hear there's a bit of a snap at the start from the second tom hit. Bring it a little lower. Still there. Still there. That's like bang on. So generally, when you're setting this up, you're going to want to find the section, and you can automate this, of course, but you're going to want to find the section that has the fastest roll in it, the shortest interval between tom hits on different shells. In this case, the time difference between the hits on the different shells here seems to be somewhere around 110 milliseconds or so, give or take. Now, if you want to go in depth with this, as I mentioned, you can automate this release setting as well. So if you have certain material at the start of the song that's a little bit slower, a little bit lighter touch on the toms, you can leave that release open a little bit longer to get a more natural sound. But during these fast sections, we kind of need to clamp down on it really quick, because there's another tom's bleed coming right up behind this source that we want to preserve, basically. So 116 seems pretty good. And adjust your gate settings accordingly for the threshold, because the threshold is super key too. So if I drop the threshold too low, you're going to hear the bleed again. See? And then it comes back. So you want to get this just right. And if you go too high, you lose it entirely. See, like the gate doesn't even, or the EQ doesn't even react now. Oh, it did very quickly. But that's useless, right? We want a little bit more of that action on the tom. Now this fill is a Herta style fill, so there's about 4 hits that we want to hear. Da-da-da-da is what we want to hear. That's nice. And now let's, on that last hit, try and get the most of the natural sustain we possibly can. That seems pretty good to me. Okay, so just to go over this one more time, the gate, we enable send MIDI note on open close. Whatever note you want, it doesn't matter. In this case, the default was 69 on channel 1. Somebody had a sense of humor, apparently. In my case, I put my actual shaping, tonal shaping EQ after the gate to establish, the general tone of the drum that I want. And then I put what I would call the control EQ for the sustain after my frequency carving here, so to speak. So send MIDI note, open close channel 69. We put an EQ at the end. We go to the parameters list. We go to parameter modulation, MIDI link, for the frequency of low pass band number 1. It gives you this menu here. You can set the top slider to the line. You can see the lines right there. You enable link from MIDI or effects parameter, and you choose your MIDI note right here by going to MIDI, note, and then scrolling down to 69 and selecting it. The offset helps you to set where the frequency is set to on the EQ for the low pass. So you can set it wherever you like, and you can adjust this accordingly, to taste whatever you like. Scale is a little less useful. Basically, it's a percentage of how open the parameter will get. So if I set this to like 30%, and I bring the offset all the way down, see, it's only going from like 300, it seemed, to about 1200 hertz, which isn't ideal in this case, right? But you could probably find a use case for that somewhere. So for me, I find most of the usable sustain of the drum is below 400. And yeah, sounds pretty good. Now, this has been applied to every tom already. So just to A/B this, I'm going to disable all the effects on these channels. And I've got the tom bus soloed. Let's see what we've got for effects here. So yeah, again, the compressor's off. Let's just enable it. That's fine. It doesn't really make a difference. And so this is the before. Not great. Let's re-enable the effects on the tom channels. Much better, right? So now, as you can tell, for example, tom 4 has a lot going on in its sustain. You can still hear the drums in the background. So is there anything we can do here? So our EQ is set pretty well. Sustain can be a little longer on this. You can hear the start of a cymbal hit in there. So I want it around 123. Oh, it's still there. Maybe there. 116 is fine. So at this point, the last thing you're probably going to want to do is actually dial in these regions, right? Because this is pretty long. That's a hell of a long time for a floor tom to be sustaining in a metal mix. So let's try just a regular fade out here. That seems okay. I mean, this is in isolation, of course. So, your mileage may vary if you're going to do it this way, but just for the sake of demonstration, let's do something like this. All right, and these are just arbitrary choices. I'll obviously dial this in the mix when I'm actually working on the mix, but let's see. Oh, I should probably unsolo that. That's pretty good. Let's hear it in the mix now. We'll go back a little bit. Pretty sick, if you ask me. I think that's more than usable, especially with the source material that I had to work with. This is my own personal kit in my basement. I haven't had much experience in the past recording real drums. Now I'm getting it all the time, basically, and this is one of the big hurdles that I've encountered. since setting up the kit with the mics and stuff downstairs. So until I can get myself into a more suitable space, I'm probably going to be dealing with bleed all the time, in a extreme way, because bleed is just the part of the reality of recording drums, of course. But this gives me a lot of confidence, right? This is really easy to set up, and you can do this with a gate too. Like I have these regions all chopped up right now, just to get rid of all the unnecessary stuff happening in the background. But if you don't have time to do that, you can, like in this case, I have a toucan gate running on my tom bus, and before I decided to record this video, I didn't have all these toms chopped up, and that gate, now with how cleaned up the audio is with this MIDI trick, with the MIDI signal from the other gate, having a gate on the tom bus was all I needed really to clean all of this up. And there was really nothing I needed to do after that. So if you're pressed for time, you can set this MIDI trick up on your tom tracks and send all the toms to a bus, throw a gate on the bus, and you can probably get away with it. Yeah, so hope you guys dig that trick. I think it's super sick. Let's go through it one more time in review. We've got a gate that sends a MIDI note, MIDI on and off note on channel 69 to an EQ, and we modulate the low pass 1 band's frequency with that MIDI note. And the gate settings basically dictate the duration of the note, and that allows us to, without diminishing the natural attack of the drum in any way, allow the attack to come through and then clamp down on the signal after that attack is done, and only let the frequencies that are relevant to the sustain come through. I think it's super powerful. I'm kind of blown away by this trick. I think it's super sick, as I mentioned already. So I hope you guys get a bunch of use out of this. Let me know if you have any questions. You can feel free to comment on the video. I'll respond to any questions that come through. And let me know if you have success with this. All right, guys. Cheers.